Welcome to Rave Waves Eyes on the Book Show. A quick reminder that June celebrates midsummer festivals in many places around the world. This is your time to get out and enjoy some fresh air, even if it's only in your own backyard. I'm your host, Rox Berkey, broadcasting live today from Dallas, Texas. Today's show is being sponsored by Karen Black, Race into Murder. If you would like to know how to get your own commercial to air during one of our shows, just visit the Rave Waves tab on the RRBC website for information. It's a fantastic way to promote your books. Joining us today from Nottingham, England, is Keith Wright, author of Murder Me Tomorrow. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Listeners, if you have questions or comments for Keith, I will be opening the floor for those questions and comments throughout the show. Your mics will remain muted until that time. We ask that you please give a little wave of your hand if you want to be recognized. At that time, you'll be asked to unmute your mic. You may also access the chat function located at the bottom of your screen to type a question or comment to us along the way. Again, thank you for joining us today, Keith. We're thrilled to learn more about you and your book.
Cool, excellent.
So,
what would you like to know?
I think a lot of the audience would enjoy learning about your professional background before you decided to write novels. You want to share?
Yeah, sure. So, I used to be in the police force for 25 years, in the CID for most of that time. About 20 plus years in the CID, and then I retired after 25 years as a detective sergeant, and then I went into the corporate sector as what they call a corporate investigator, just dealing with, actually it was for, you'll know the company Walgreens, the American company, Walgreens, and so there's, with it being like a pharmaceutical business, there was lots of strangeness and people dying because of overdoses and legal issues and blackmails and briberies. You'd be surprised. So yeah, that was after the police, and that's the professional career. My writing career started in the early 1990s, and I wrote. In fact, that's when I wrote the first version of One Oblique One. And got taken up by a publisher. I don't know, fortunately, and that started my writing journey really back in '91.
Wow, that's awesome. So I believe that you're now retired, Keith. Are you a full-time writer at this point, or do you consider it just a hobby?
Full time. Yeah, no, I don't see it as a hobby. It's a need, isn't it? It's something that. I think once you get, but I had quite a hiatus from writing because of work and various other issues. And thankfully, I'm now in a position to be able to do it full time. So for the last probably 18 months, 2 years, I've been sort of writing full time, but chosen to do it as an indie. Certainly in the first instance because it's so long-winded with publishers.
And I totally understand where you're coming from. That's awesome. So I know that you reside in Nottingham, England, and we have one of our folks in the peanut gallery from Southern England, I think was what was pointed out. Is your residence why your crime thriller series is set in this city?
Yes, I mean, bear in mind, and I know none is highly experienced, and I'm sure many others are, but of course I'm from the school of write about what you know about. Now I know that's changed. Plus, it is easier in your mind's eye and cheaper than flying off to Monte Carlo or wherever you want to set them if to do the research. But I know the city so well, so it just seemed a natural thing to do. The other reason is that we always have a little bit of love for our own city, and it's nice to sort of spotlight it, I guess, as well. Or a lot of crime novels are in, I don't know, New York, Chicago, etc. So that's why I ended up basing it in Nottingham. I once, funny enough, it just reminds me, I was in America many years ago, in Orlando, and I met a guy, Chuck and Jackie. I remember them well. Very friendly, very nice. And we were talking, we didn't know each other, we met at a dinner. And he asked me what I did, and I told him I was a cop and so on, and where I was from. And he said, "Gee, you're the sheriff of Nottingham?" Yeah. But I wasn't the sheriff of Nottingham. So I explained. There was no Robin Hood involved. You know.
Oh, no, that's delicious. I love that. So why did you decide, though, to set this in the 1980s as the best time frame for your stories? Because that seems to be where they're focused.
Well, so when I started writing, so I've rewritten the 3 of the books,
Okay.
but I started writing in the around 1990. So they were pretty contemporary when I wrote them. First off, and it was only later when I started to go back to the books that I wanted to add some features, because I felt they weren't complete enough. It's just a personal thing. They did well, don't get me wrong, and they were well received and with good critical acclaim and so on. But it was just a thing for me that I wanted to give it a little a sprinkle. But I set them in the 80s, and I tell you another good reason for it as a crime writer, and some may agree, some may not. But back in the 80s, we didn't have DNA, and we didn't have social media, and we didn't have satellite navigation, and all of those things that make investigations very much more simpler, but far less boring, far more boring, should I say?
Right.
So you know, it was the start of the change into the technological world. Nobody had phones they were steering into. We had to talk to each other. We were, there were characters, and all that sort of stuff is a good. That's why I like to set them in the 80s. I mean, I spoke to my son. He said, "Oh, why not bring them up to date when you write them?" But I didn't want to, because I say it. Plus, I think as well, you know, part of the escapism, it helps that escapism by having it set in a different time, away from it all, if you know what I mean.
No, that's very good. That's a very interesting way of why you did. It makes a whole lot of sense, especially the internet and social media. We're getting a lot of comments in the chat window that the folks admire the cover. There was a comment about it being a little bit, dark. And the other comment that's in here that I want to bring up before we open it up is that Yvette asked, does the book need to be read in order? The series, as it were. Is that a recommendation, or are these standalone?
Great question, and thanks for raising it, Yvette. No, that you can read them all independently. You can pick any one out that tickles your fancy, and you won't lose anything. So yeah, but it's a series because it's the same detective, pretty much the same detective characters. That's all. Right. The circumstances and everything else change. But the main team, if you like, Stark, who's the main protagonist, and the rest of the team are pretty much the same, unless anybody's been killed in the meantime. Whoops.
Yeah, people die in murder mysteries. There's just no doubt about it. So, you mentioned early on in our conversation that you kind of took a hiatus from writing. So, at what point did it strike you that you wanted to be a full-time writer?
No, I always. So always have. I actually sat down and my first experience of thinking, wow, this is great, was I was about 15, and for some reason my mum had some Ed McBain books. I don't know if a few of you should probably know Ed McBain, lying around the house, and I started reading them, and they sent me crazy. I love them, absolutely love them, and they were around New York homicide division, right. And they were fantastic. So that turned me on to crime fiction, and that also, I suspect, a little bit going in the police. Fantastic writer. I actually met the guy, believe it or not.
Really?
I actually met Ed McBain. This it just shows what a crazy world it is. So he was a big inspiration. Now, some years later, when I'd written One Oblique One, I went to BoucherCon, which is the World International Mystery Festival, if you like. Why? Because it was being held in Nottingham. and I was a member of the Crime Writers Association. And I met some fantastic writers, Ian Rankin, what's his name, Robinson, even Colin Dexter and others. But by a strange quirk of fate anyway, I ended up at a table, and Ed McBain was sat at that table because he'd come over under the guise of Evan Hunter, because he'd written The Birds, the screenplay for the film, Hitchcock film, The Birds. And he was in Nottingham. And I actually met the guy. And the only thing I'll say is, never meet your heroes. but yes, he was a little tired, I think. But still, it was a strange full circle for me, you know.
Totally exciting. You know, I know that writing full time, many authors like to target when they write and kind of set up a routine of sorts. Do you have that kind of discipline, and can you explain it a little bit?
Okay, so a lot of crime writers like to just have a rough idea and start. I've done it that way. I did trace and eliminate that way, and it's a lot more fun to do, I think, because the characters tell you what to do, and you follow a particular route, and it's more fun to do it that way. But I seek solace in, and this comes back to when I was writing and working. So I used to do a plot, and then I'd do a skeleton, scene by scene skeleton. Right. I don't know, just 3 or 4 lines per skeleton, per paragraph of the skeleton. And the reason I did that was that I could leave it, go off and do whatever I was doing, and not have it kicking my head out and not bothering me constantly. I could forget it, come back to it, and then I knew exactly where I was. Yes, pick it up, and off we go. So that's why I tend to have done it that way. Oh,
I love that. That's terrific. So that's perfect lead in to talk about your thriller, Murder Me Tomorrow. Can you give us a little background on the character Paul Masters and why you chose him as a story focus?
So Paul, that Murder Me Tomorrow, I wrote totally from scratch last year. It's not a rewritten book or anything like that. I wrote it sparkly new, but I chose him from a short story. It's the start of a short story I wrote.
Okay.
And the short story is about a guy who goes to bed and wakes up and finds his wife and daughter murdered inexplicably, impossibly, and you know, how could that be, sort of stuff. So that was the short story, and that I kind of liked that idea, but I wanted to see it run through and have him arrested, even though he's innocent, by this obnoxious cop called D.I. Mole, and start to think, hold on, this doesn't seem right. And to start asking a few questions and kicking a few car tires and all that sort of thing, and trying to get to which he does. And then it turns out that actually there's another murder, and it clearly can't be him, and so on and so forth. So it goes on from there. But the original seed of the idea is from a short story, and that short story came from me leaving a window open one night. I went to bed and left a window open, and thought, oh, what would I do why would I do that? And so that was it. What could have happened, you know? And then being like we are, imagination goes away, and we're often thinking, well, if somebody could have come in and gone out, would I have known? What if they took something I didn't know? No, that's not it. And that's how the germ of the idea started. You know?
Wow. And Maura Beth in the window is saying, you know, stories can come from anywhere, Keith, and I totally agree with that as well. Stark is another fascinating character you personalized for the readers. Is he based upon somebody you know?
So what's strange about, so no is the quick answer. He's a composite. If anybody, it's me. If anybody, it's me. But he is a composite character, as are all of there's about half a dozen detectives in this, which is really a topic in itself, because usually there's 2, isn't there? Which is just totally unreal. But anyway, but there's about half a dozen or so that are involved. Now, those half dozen, if you went to any CID office, they'd be there, pretty much, loosely. You've got the ex-army rough person. You've got the poser who's top, lovely suits, all that sort of thing. You've got a vegan character. You've got the glamour detective policewoman. Cheryl, I brought in mixed race with her challenges, etc. So they're pretty much composite characters,
Sure. No, that's great. So I want to take a pause and see if there's any questions from the gallery before I continue. Anybody have a question they'd like to raise directly to Keith? Shirley, please unmute yourself and pose a question to our guest.
I was reading your blurb, and the one thing that caught me was how you were describing someone taking their last breath. I don't even know what kind of question to ask you on that one.
Right.
But can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I think that you remember the old cowboy films and somebody was shot and grab. Oh, you can't see me, but they grab their chest and fall to the floor, and and that's not enough, is it? And there's lots of issues around some of the books I write, rape issues and serious adult issues. I don't want to pussyfoot around that stuff. I really want to get into the detail of it, because just because it matters. And I think this is just my view. There's lots of people that cozy writers and so on. Don't misunderstand me here. This is just me. I want people to be aware of quite what all this means, and it's serious, and it changes people's lives. So the detail, and I say usually when people die, it's kind of there they are alive, ouch, it hurts, scream, and blackness. And I wonder what goes through somebody's mind who is dying. I've been in a few situations where I thought I was going to die. So I've got half a glimpse at it, but not, obviously going through other than talking to people who have had relatives with those experiences, etc.
The descriptions are so extensive. I've noticed in reading this particular book, the visuals are just remarkable once you are inside the story. So the graphics on the cover have been mentioned already, and they're dark and ominous. Where did the design come from, Keith?
So just me. So the original ones that were published had a different design. I wanted to come totally away from that. That was by a I've got the paintings, the original paintings on the wall, not in the office. But I designed them basically. I designed the covers.
Right, artist, is that what you're telling me here?
I wouldn't go that far, but I just knew what I wanted to convey, really. And it's very easy nowadays, although strangely with this technology here, I've totally failed somehow. But it's dead easy to make a film, to create stuff nowadays. It really is, honestly. I'm no spring chicken, and I'm 57, and I some of it's really new, but it is so easy to do. So it was only through playing around and messing around that I found something that I liked to manage to capture it, and off we go. The hardest thing I find about the indie stuff is formatting. That's what absolutely it does my head in. I can't. I've had to order 3 or 4 books before I've got it right to understand what it looks like in the actual book. But yeah. So that's how I did the covers. It was just through me, really.
That is very, very exciting. So how long did it take you initially, or even consolidated as you've been working through it, to create this novel? Because it was originally released in October of last year, right?
Yes. So I would say that, and this is a surprising thing, and the beauty of writing full time is that I would say it only took. I say only. This is totally. It's all relative, isn't it? But so I think it only took about 4 or 5 months. Now, when I was being published, it would take about a year to write and edit, and then another year to publish the thing. It's so slow. But that's what I love, the immediacy of being able to write a book, get it right, get it out, leave it, go back to it, and off you go, and all that. But when you're ready, and it's bang, you're on, you're in, and you can get it out there. You know, I do like that immediacy about it. It's about 4 or 5 months, I think. Which I don't think
That's
pretty
terrific.
quick.
That is terrific. And I know, Pat, I'm sorry, you had a question, please. You
Yeah,
have the floor.
Yes, I do. Keith, so first, I'm thinking German. First of all, I want you to know that I really appreciate how you go into the deep point of view in your books. That's
Thank
what
you.
drives that, and I see it, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, oh, wow. And I'm in the story because it's not shallow, it's deep point of view. And it reminds me a lot of the English, because I only look at English crime films like Morris and Lewis, and I love them, and Colin Dexter. I think I got every one of his books. I really enjoy. I enjoy. It's not a question. It's just to say I know when somebody masters deep point of view, and that's how you draw your readers in, and you did a good job of that.
Thank you, Pat. That's very kind of you. I'm grateful. There's lots of things in the book that I think people can shy away from because they get a little bit frightened. And I think the danger sometimes is to write is to write for anybody but yourself. In my humble opinion, I think you've got to write for yourself because if you try and write for the only 7 billion, is it, or whatever there is in the world, you're going to go a bit confused. And so I think, and also if you don't want to approach, and I see this particularly with young writers on social media. I see people saying, don't say this word, don't do that, don't couch it in this way. You might upset somebody if somebody gets hurt, and then what? I just don't understand it. How can you write crime without hurting anybody? But it's so. I think you've just got to do your own thing, and hope that there's other people like you that are into that, and don't shy away from the issues. Stand up for what you think is right, and that's the way I would go about it. I think you've got to do your own thing, because otherwise it's not you, it's not your book. And I was fortunate. I was interested. I read one of Nonny's interviews, and there are lots of great stuff in there. One of the things was about publishers interfering, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. I was really lucky because my agent taught me so much. He was an elderly gentleman, real old gentleman, was confirmed bachelor, shall we say, and but he taught me so much, the guy, and so much. And he gave me the ownership of it. He never ever said, oh, you've got to change this, you must take that out, you must do. He would just say, I think that's rubbish. Very succinct. Oh, okay. But he said, but if you think, and there was one where I insisted, no, I think that's integral, because going back to Pat's point about detail, and I wanted to keep that in. So, but the beauty and both the beauty and the isolation of indie writing it's yours, and there's a beauty in that, but there's also a loneliness, isn't there? So that's where I am with the detail. That's where I am with the writing for yourself, not for anybody else.
No, that's awesome, Keith. And there's some comments in the window. Nani brings up a good comment and agrees with much of what you said, but she comments that there are many who shy away from, the tough choices and the tough subjects and it's everyone should be able to stand up for what they want, what they believe in with good backing.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I think so. And we could be here all day talking about this subject, I guess, but we all believe in stuff, and we're all entitled to believe in that stuff, as long as it's not, I don't know, physically hurting someone or, criminal or anything, things like that. But So we're all, but the problem is that sort of world seems to be slipping away a little bit, and that, you know, if you disagree with me, I hate you. Hey, why? What? I'm never going to learn anything if I don't listen to you, and you know, and so that really worries me, and I think shying away from it. I like to think I can say hand on heart, I have never shied away from anything that I really believed in. Caused me a lot of problems. Sometimes problems in the police too, and Pat surely might know why. But you stand up for yourself and you stand up for what you believe in. Well, I came from a rough area in Nottingham, where I grew up. There's 5 of us kids and my mum and dad, and we lived in a 2-bedroom, what they call a prefab. You might know what a prefab is. It was an old prefabricated building that was built for the war. You know, it was a temporary accommodation, and it was tough old times, you know, and like many others, you know, woe is me and all that. I don't carry it around with me. But the thing was, when I went into the police, I thank the Lord ended up working the area I lived, and I was where I was brought up, and that made me accountable.
Yep.
That really made me accountable to my family and my friends, some of whom I arrested eventually, actually. And they knew why, and it was all good. But it was that sort of a play of a town. But it made me accountable. But I always wanted my shaving mirror. I wanted to look into that shaving mirror and see Keith Boo's looking back, and you know. And that's what I've always been. But it gets you into, but it hurts you. It gets you into trouble, and it's hard. But it's hard to be a good person. So.
And that's a great point. You know, I know that you also like to write short stories along with your novels. Yeah. So do you have a preference at this point between the novels or the short stories, or where do you stand on that?
That's a great question. They're so different to me. They really feel different to me. Short stories, what I like about them for me is it opens up the whole field, because I'm writing in this genre, because I'm writing in that time and in that place in my novels, I can do some up-to-date stuff. Now, the short stories I've done are crime related, but some of them are really loosely. They're really loosely crime related, and so I love to do short stories. I find them quite easy, and I love the twist, and I like the diversity that you can use with short stories. But for a you know, tone, for a piece of work, I guess there's a big pride in having a novel. And it's kind of yours, and it's that business of you were here, weren't you, once, you know, and it's all that. It's leaving your stamp on the world as well, even though, you know, it might not be to the extent of J.K. Rowling. It's still for your future relatives and so on. You've left your stamp. So differently, I like them both, but I do like the diversity of short stories. But I don't do them all in one go. What I do is, if I get fed up and bored, or I'm stuck with my novel, I'll just come away, and I might fiddle about and write a short story or two, and take my head away from it for a bit, and then I'll bank those, and then. You know, eventually it'll take me a while to get another anthology up. I would think I've got about 3, I think. I've got in the pot for the next one.
You know, I realize that you're a new member of RRBC and this family. What do you think of us so far? Are you having fun, or?
Yeah, it seems quite intense. Okay. It's because I've not been in such a club. There's quite a lot to it, and I think there's sometimes I feel like I'm plate spinning. What have I got to do? I've got to review this book, say hello, do this, and I get I got a bit sort of confused of what am I going to. I'm getting into it. I've just been on holiday for 2 weeks, and
Nice.
I was still trying to write an interview for the 12 authors of the and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so hey ho. But it's what I do like about it is this sort of thing. Now the last couple I couldn't get on because my daughter sort of goes back to my mum at the time 12 o'clock usually, your time. So it's been tricky, but I do like this sort of thing because it's so interesting. But I like the bit where I can listen to you guys, because that's where we pick up stuff, isn't it? That's where we learn stuff. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting on to all of this sort of stuff, because I find it really interesting, and people have got so much to say, and got their lives. I did a podcast interview for a guy, and it recently, and it's called Ordinary. Okay, and it's about ordinary people.
There you go.
More fascinating. There's nothing more fascinating. Ordinary people, proper characters, who have lived a life. Because often in the living of that life, particularly quiet people, still waters run deep, don't they? Yeah, quiet people, if you actually take the time to spend time and listen to them, there's so much they've got to say. I think, so I like the prospect of that sort of thing, listening to people and reading interviews and stuff, to see what everybody's on with, what they're doing.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing you next week on the By the Book show that'll be posted. We're just about out of time today, and time has just flown by. But I really want to thank you, Keith, for joining us here today with Eyes on the Book and allowing us to get to know you better and sharing your very unique story with us about your professional crime background and your insights on a lot of different things. But it's time for us to take a short break and pay some bills. Nani? Oh, another great book. I love that book. To my studio audience, you make these shows so extra special. Thank you for joining us here today as well. Remember, if you miss a live show, you can always find each and every episode in the archives of the RRBC site. To all the authors and readers out there, enjoy your time with family and friends as things are starting to open up in many areas of our world. Be safe, nice, and mindful of those around you. This is your host, Rox Berkey, thanking you for joining us on another episode of Eyes on the Book, a Rave Waves production. Be sure to join us again for another episode of Rave Waves, where all things literary are our passion. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep your eyes on the book, and I'm waving for Keith. Okay, everybody wave for Keith.
I'm waving. I am waving. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming along.
Bye-bye.